Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bruce Celery to the stage.
Hello! Hello! Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Bruce Celery, and I am the president of the Canadian Club of Toronto. We love the Canadian Club, and we are so glad that you're here. The Canadian Club was founded in 1897, which is like kind of unimaginable, but if you go in the Wayback Time Machine and picture what our events were like 123 years ago. Picture like the Royal York and cloth tablecloths and venison and liquid lunches and no one except for straight acting white males in the room at any time. We were very, very focused on one very singular offering. Well, obviously, much has changed in the 123 years that have evolved since. We, ever since that time, have hosted prime ministers and indigenous leaders and CEOs and executive directors of not-for-profits, and it is a massive spectrum of speakers that we host. The one thing that is consistent with every single event that we host is that our mission is to engage Canadians in what matters most. That's what we do. So we do that in very formal ways. We do that in informal ways with tonight's panel. So I would argue, and I think everyone here would agree, that comedy matters to Canadians. And it is, yeah. And it is kind of helpful that Canadians are damn good at it. They are very, very good at comedy. So in a second, you're going to meet a bunch of this country's most extraordinary comics. But before we do that, we do have one holdover tradition from like probably the 1970s. It is our business card draw. So if we could have Kathleen come up. I love it is. Okay. This is the commentary of our times. So, you know, in the 60s, this would have been full. And these business cards, oh, I love this. People have been like editing the phone numbers on the card. It's like, I haven't used this card in 4 years. That's not accurate. So no one cares. Your odds are high if you happen to carry a business card, because no one does. So I'm going to ask our moderator, Tite, to choose a business card. The lucky winner will receive a bottle of wine from Foreign Affairs Winery. And the winner is?
The winner is Chris Black from Ontario Arts Council.
Chris Black, but yes, you're getting the booze. Thank you. There's a whole bunch of formality that we are going to completely throw out the window. We love that we're at this new and different venue, and it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight. His name is Tite. He is the founder of Church and State, a content marketing agency. He is a stand-up comic. He is a professional speaker. He is a dad. He is a very old friend. He's the author of a book called Think, Do, Say, and he is going to wrangle this gang of crazy, brilliant people into some semblance of what the future is for comedy in 2020. Ron, to you. Oh, shit. That's Steve.
That's
Steve. It's extra Steve.
Thank you. And please, a big hand for your president, Bruce Celery, everybody. Yes, thank you. The most important role that I have is of a father. I have an almost 2-year-old at home and one on the way. And I know, you're going, you look too old to have an almost 2-year-old. And so all of you, right now, you're to your neighbor, you're like, second marriage. Probably, this is second marriage. First marriage. I just started very late, like this event. See? Consistency. This is good. We're not very late. No, we're pretty on time. This is an important conversation. No, it really is. No, you will only speak when, no. This is an important conversation. 15 years ago, we're now celebrating the 15th anniversary of Jon Stewart appearing on a show called Crossfire on CNN. And that night, and we all know that when a comedian appears on a national television show, right? Best material, go for the great laughs, of course. And on that night, a political discussion show. From the left, I'm Paul Miguel. From the right, I'm Tucker Carlson. And Jon Stewart actually said, you're harming America. And Tucker Carlson said, geez, John, you're not being very funny. And then Jon Stewart said 9 words. I think he said 9 words that changed the face of comedy. Because when Tucker Carlson said, geez, John, you're not being very funny, Jon Stewart said, no, I'm not going to be your monkey. That moment of silence, delivered from a comedian, was one of the most powerful moments on television. And not only changed the face of comedy and blowing up the entire genre to the point that we got Trevor Noah and Samantha Bee and Hassan Minhaj and Stephen Colbert and the Beaverton, but completely changed the force of comedy in realizing that we could actually, yes, deliver the punchlines, yes, have great insights, yes, make people laugh hilariously. But following the laugh was an opportunity to do more. And then more and more, what we've seen over the past 15 years is that really powerful comedy is coming in those moments of silence. And whether it is, for the young folks, whether it's Bo Burnham telling an audience, part of me loves you, part of me hates you, part of me needs you, part of me fears you. Or whether it's Mike Birbiglia ending Thank God for Jokes, not on a big mic drop moment with laughter, but instead asking people to not quote him out of context. Or whether it's Hannah Gadsby's show, Nanette, where she stops in the middle and says, no more will my pain and suffering be the source of comedy. Or whether it's the most juvenile pee-pee, poo-poo, fart joke comedian of all time, Adam Sandler, ending his special 100% Fresh, not on a fart joke, but on a beautiful tribute to Chris Farley and a song, romantic, beautiful song that thanks his wife. The comedy has changed. That's what we want to talk about. What is the role of comedy? Can comedy actually lead to social change? Is comedy now doing what music used to do? What is the role of comedy? Are we putting too much pressure on today's comedians to help the rest of us out? And I can't think of 4 more appropriate, more brilliant people to help us have that conversation. Are you ready to meet your panelists? Yes. He is the co-anchor of the Beaverton. Please welcome Miguel Rivas. If you just, there's stairs, if you go right there.
Great to see you.
Welcome, thank
Thanks
you.
for having me. Hello.
Writer and comedian Elvira Kurt is here.
I took stairs. There's one stair.
You should be there.
I'm so confused.
We should be there. It's very formal.
Do
He is the host of Canada's #1 news quiz show, Because News. Please welcome Gavin Crawford. Welcome. I don't think did I shake you?
This is taken.
Oh,
I don't think I shook when you
Oh, it's
came
okay,
up.
it's
That's
all
right. She is the co-creator, writer, and executive producer of Baroness Von Sketch. Please welcome Aurora Browne. Welcome.
Hello. Why did the women get shorter chairs?
Well, we staged it that way.
That's the first question, isn't
That's
it?
the first question. That's the first question. And soon to be a sketch on your show.
Wait.
What's interesting, before we start the formal proceedings,
I'm not allowed to swear.
this is how old we've all gotten. 22 years ago, Aurora Browne, myself, and Bruce Sellery.
We're born.
It's been a really rough 22 years.
Hard living.
We've
living.
grayed already.
Puberty was horrible.
Oh,
It was
God.
horrible.
Followed closely by menopause. It's gonna be great.
We were in a level 1 Second City Training Center improv class.
Yep.
That's where this all began.
I can trace my entire career to being in the same improv class as you. Everything that happened because of that.
Wow.
Well, I'd say it was Jerry Schaefer, but.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No, it was you. I'll tell you later.
Okay,
No.
all right. Okay, so I want to start, Elvira.
Oh, here I am.
So,
What's with the small chair?
I said I'll only do this if the women can be just a few inches short.
and we said we'll also put a guy beside you who's like 6'4".
I'm like his brooch.
If she needs a nap.
Yeah.
Okay, Elvira, last year you did an interview, and this was the headline
Yes.
on CBC Radio. And it said, Elvira Kerr has been making people laugh for 30 years. We were just born 22 years ago.
That's right. I was younger than you.
Now, in a new phase in her career, she's looking to make comedy out of some of the most serious issues.
That's what I do.
Why, Elvira?
Well, I think I can only speak for myself, but having done it for so long, I've also I've gone through all of the stages of being a new comic, feeling less sure of myself. I've grown into who I am, and also just as a woman, my lived experience is such that I'm occupying a very narrow sliver of time in a woman's life, right? I'm no longer the bright and shiny it girl, and I'm also not dead. So
I can confirm that. I can confirm.
So, it's an age where, I'm sort of discounted. So, I have the no fucks to give. Right. So I'm very confident. I've never felt like I've been better at what I do. So I'm really at the peak of my game now, and it's coinciding with also, wanting to tackle subjects or speak to different things that I wouldn't have done at a more insecure time in my life. I'm just more confident to say things and appeal to audience members who may not, you're going to get mainstream comedy from everyone else on the show, of a show that I appear on. But if I get out there, I'd like to make sure that I hit those people who don't get validation when they come to a comedy show, and I'm going to appeal to those people. I'm not interested any longer in being charming. I'm like a chafer. You know what I mean? You know what I mean by chafing? Like I'm like that
you get
rash,
the cattle to go
that
faster.
rash
Yeah.
on the inside of your thigh.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm on the inside of your thigh.
Your
So that's-
comedy chaps.
That's what I am. That's what I am. So that's it.
So, Aurora, the four of you in Baroness?
Yes.
Was it a similar perspective to go and to start? Because two of you were on Second City together.
Yes.
Did some of the sketch ideas, was there a frustration that those ideas, the voice of women, wasn't finding its place on Canadian stages?
Yeah, but that wasn't a new frustration. That was, like a lifelong frustration.
Right.
But we really wanted to do our thing and to have a show. I mean, it was the same for any comedian. It's like, well, we would like to succeed in our career. But it was a combo of, we feel very confident in our craft and what we want to say about the world. You get to a certain age, we realize half the people are younger tthan me now. I think maybe now I'm one of the people who knows what's happening. And then also it was just, we came in at a good time where we were trendy. We were women have always been ready to make a show.
Sure.
It's just the people who decide to give those people the green light and the money to make a show. We're like, hey, you're trendy, kind of thing. And so we had a real fierce desire from ourselves as people and from the group that we represented, that we had this kind of open field that hadn't been mowed to death, at least on television. There are tons of live sketch comedians going on. But we wanted to, and we wanted to go from the small P, personal, political, to the larger things. We're not a topical news show. We wanted to go to the underlying truths that we can all kind of relate to. And there are lots of times where those things inform the world. And so, yeah, we got more confident to go after more difficult issues like untested rape kits or, unfounded things or, what did we just shoot? Something about, kids being molested, all that kind of fun stuff.
Right.
In between all the other things. I mean, it ranges from whatever's happening to us as people, whether that includes late-stage capitalism woes or I fart too much or whatever it is,
right.
that. Yeah.
But is it that and anybody can take this, but is it that audiences are seeing the importance of, let's say, the untested rape kits? That this is obviously a specific issue which leads to a bigger issue, and that people are applauding that nobody has ever had that conversation before? Or is it no one's ever found the funny in that before?
I mean, it's possible, but I think, and I'm sure we'll all speak to this. I mean, people always, I think, have always looked to comedy for, seeing like a truth of something, like something they can recognize, go, I'm not the only one, I'm not crazy, like, oh my God, this thing that I thought I was the only one. So whatever that is in life, like it was the same 200 years ago for, comedy speaking truth to power and showing people the bits of their lives, and we do that now. And the difference is just like what we're all working with, that we are people just the same as everybody else, and that recognition in the person watching by themselves going, that's me, like that's what comedy connects with.
Right.
I think.
And arguably it's like, I mean, we can pat ourselves on the back as comedians, but part of the thing is like, for Elvira and I know also for myself, and like the stuff you guys tackle on Baroness, there's like very fun, like that when you did the land acknowledgement sketch.
Oh, yes.
It was so like perfect and funny and talking about that, but I think part of the reason that's happening now is because it's actually much worse than it was 10 or 15 years ago.
Life?
No, well, life is much worse, but like just the ability to comedy, like the gatekeepers have closed off. Like in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, when I was growing up and there was Lily Tomlin and Whoopi Goldberg and people doing character comedy and Richard Pryor, and like there was like very hard satire, social comedy being made, and kind of in the like late 90s, early 2000s, the kind of gatekeepers just shut that all down. Like basically, and then now it's morphed into a weird thing in America where it's just like, well, we just talk about the news. But they're not also still making that kind of hard satire sketch. And I think we all kind of feel like, and then Nanette comes along, because there is a feeling that you're like, human beings need to talk about this frustrating, stupid things that are getting us all down, and that's what brings us together, especially when things are like really divisive.
Right.
So there is a need for comedy to get a little bit harder, which is weird because we're right in the world where nothing has any context, and you can take one little tweet of someone's 5-minute routine, remove all the context, and it'll be like, Gavin Crawford hates cats.
But you do hate cats.
Yeah.
Oh, God, you're so bad.
You know what I mean?
You brought it up.
I'm not really sure what my point is there.
But I think
things got worse, and they're kind
Point
of
is
getting
fuck
better.
cats. Like,
No, but I mean, and it's work for the audience too, to be there and be like, oh, you know what? I kind of like this, and it sort of cuts both ways, because it cuts in a way that you get the good progressive stuff where you're like, you guys do that sketch and everyone's like, oh my God, that was amazing, because that is so ridiculous. Why are they all these untested kids? And this is and you handle it perfectly. But then you also get the thing where it's like the people who are like poking their head again and being like, why can't I do a bad Chinese accent anymore? And you're like, no, you stay down.
Right.
But so it's kind of like, it's fighting a little bit right now, but with hope, Edge will win, smart Edge will win.
It's kind of a combination of factors, as you say, Gavin, and I know you haven't had a chance to speak, so maybe
I got so many things to say.
Yeah, wait. Maybe we should hear from...
You're in the middle of a point. Come on.
Well,
wanna hear it.
it was only because, of what you were saying, Gavin, which is true, that, there were, like, at the time of Richard Pryor, even Lenny Bruce, that there was a real intent to address either indirectly through a character, right? Like, you're going to relate to what I'm saying. I'm going to say some really harsh, strong political truths, either through a character, as Richard Pryor, or I'm just going to tell you how fucked up religion is if you're Lenny Bruce, or politics, or what have you. There was a real appetite for that at a certain time, and then I came into the comedy scene just after that really key time when it became really narrow. The focus of comedy was really narrow. As you say, this locking down of like, it's only going to be angry white dudes and everyone else is just going to, have to settle for their piece of the pie. And then suddenly social media split that all apart. And then, suddenly everyone who's got a grudge can just, speak up and say, I think that routine's bullshit. And suddenly a comedian's back on their heels going, whoa, I want to just be able to say what I want without any kind of penalty at all. So it's this weird time that we're in, and I've lived through so many shifts in comedy, and I know that I have because I've had to adjust as I stay relevant. In order to stay relevant, I've had to shift my style of comedy with every wave that has come. But this time for me is by far the most exciting, where now with social media, all the barriers to whatever you want to say are gone. So, but you have to be, the price you pay is that you have to now be ready for a two-way interaction with your audience. But we are back to that time where you can have those Richard Pryor character people and all of your amazing characters and Baroness, all those.
Can I just say something here? Elvira speaks for me.
That's sort of what I was hoping for. And anytime I can.
Another beer, please.
Well,
anytime I can embody the voice, if I'm in a mind meld with a
We are.
with a
Minds are
cis
melding.
het guy, I mean.
the brooch speaks.
Listen to me.
The brooch speaks.
It's like I'm in the hive mind with the picture going with that.
This is a new movie premise right here.
Yeah.
The brooch speaking. So Miguel, based on what Elvira just said, does that mean that it requires more courage now? Because on one hand, people are expecting comedians to lead social change.
I think what Miguel is trying to say.
If your people want to talk to my people's Elvira.
Elvira, could you please tell Miguel that I think his point is great?
Thanks. Ask Aurora, does she like me?
But I mean, you have to be really brave. I mean, this country is divided politically.
Yeah.
And you're now expected to stand up and try and appeal to both sides.
Well,
That
I
takes
think
bravery.
there's like a weird. As soon as I entered comedy myself, I went through sketch and improv more than stand up.
Yeah.
Because I can't do stand up and I'm bad at it. But something that really occurred to me really quickly that I didn't agree with was this like venerated position that the comedian had. Not that a comedian can't speak truth to power and doesn't speak truth to power all the time, but that it was like this vaulted position just to be a comedian and go out there and speak your guts. And it's like, no, you have to also be good and funny and have something to say. Anything is available for comedy, and you can make fun of it. But of course, the harder things are harder. That's the whole point. The whole idea of comedy, the oldest adage is that comedy is harder than death. It's supposed to be difficult. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it's more difficult now doesn't mean that comedy has died or changed or not, or become moot and irrelevant. That's ridiculous. It just got harder because of a two-way conversation, because people can say bullshit when you say something. Whereas before, it was, the gatekeeping was so strong and so specific to straight white men that it felt like one style and one topic were what were defining comedy. And part of that was there was no response to anything any of those guys said ever. Right. You go on stage and you say it and it's so raw and you're a hero for saying it. But then if it's the worst thing anyone's ever said, no one's going to tell you.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And now people can tell you, and that's part of free speech too. This is like the whole PC police is ridiculous. Free speech is also criticism of your work and a response to your work. No one's saying necessarily don't say it, but they're allowed to say, that sucks, dude.
Right, you have to be accountable.
A lot of that shit sucks.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's also incumbent, just if you want to get really, political and serious about it, like when we say comedy is hard, it actually is hard when you're in Turkey and you can get arrested for doing a satire of the president. That is actually hard. I think that the speaking up that we're all talking about, because comedy is basically saying, hey, this is bullshit, and people go, yeah, that's right, that is bullshit. And then when comedians say something like, oh, this is bullshit, we're like, no, your bullshit is bullshit. That happens more. So I don't know if it's harder necessarily to be funny, but when things are difficult in life, when art changes when you're going through a fascist, the art and the comedy and the stuff in Germany pre-World War I was pretty intense, because intense things were happening. And I think that's always what comedy does, and it's actually incumbent upon everybody to keep the conversation actually going a little bit louder and to be a little bit more ready to speak out because that's the only thing that keeps fascism from happening.
Kevin Hart has a documentary coming out about the hard time he had losing the Oscars gig.
Right.
And it's like, his life is great. He's having a
great.
fantastic life every day.
Yeah.
He never encountered a problem. The idea that he was canceled or encountered any strife is ridiculous.
It's so bananas, and people are right. Like I know Gavin was saying that you can take anything out of context, but if you do go back, like it's difficult to be judged harshly for the stupid things you may have said in a less evolved time in your life. But they exist. If there's a record of it and it exists, then it is what you do when you move on. And I think that what's also true of the fact that we can now have a two-way communication directly with the public at large, either fans of you or just people who hate you. And often those, there's a Venn diagram overlapping.
Yeah.
That. What are you going to do? How are you going to move on from there? Like, do you acknowledge? You have to be accountable, and I think people are savvy enough to know when you're being authentic in your response to that.
Now, is there an issue? I mean, usually, most of the comedy community would skew fairly left. Is that fair to say?
I would
Yeah.
say so. Yeah.
I guess,
Yes.
but I think in the stand-up world, there are a lot of very socially political, like a lot of, and I don't know how they'd identify. I would call them like butthurt. Do you know what I mean? Like their butt hurt.
I actually don't know what you mean.
Well, they just.
Oh, let me break it down for you.
My butt
Hurt.
hurts.
Hurts.
Oh, got
Yeah,
it. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And you can imagine the mood that would come along with having a hurt butt.
Yeah.
Unpleasant.
So those I would encounter. There's a lot of guys who I don't know if the way they actually think is to be a contrarian, or if they are actually so butthurt about not being able to just say whatever they want whenever they want. I agree that most of the people I relate to and connect with are progressive, but I will be on a comedy show many times where I'll see a comic and I will be surprised that the audience is laughing, and then start to feel a little contemptuous of the audience for validating with laughter a position that I think is regressive or troubling.
Can we get a hyperlink on the live stream for a butt hurt definition?
Yeah.
Everybody at home is searching right now, anyhow.
Yeah.
No, but we had talked to Miguel the other day about the Seth Meyers.
Yeah.
Seth Meyers did his White Horse Correspondent dinner speech, poking fun at Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And many say that was the moment when Donald Trump said, "Screw you."
Well, I think even
I'm
worse
gonna
than
run.
that is the one that Obama did, which
Yeah,
which
that
Seth
was
Meyers
the-
wrote. I'm sure he wrote it with someone else, but
John Oliver invited Donald Trump on live TV to please run for the whole
Yeah,
thing.
oh my God.
I think
But
a bunch of people.
just go back after this. Go YouTube Donald Trump sitting in the White House
Sitting,
Correspondents'
yeah.
Dinner watching
His
Obama
reaction.
as he goes, "Let's take a look at the White House if Trump won, huh?" And it's like a flashing gold White House, and everyone's like, "Ah!"
And he's
and you cut
just-
to Trump, and he's just like,
Still.
so
Yeah, but
dark
that's the
and sad.
textbook definition of butthurt.
Thank you.
And then he's like, I'm going to run for president.
that's
And then
right.
he wins.
No,
and
the
now,
hyperlink on the live stream just is of that video.
And now you have a weird situation where it's like impossible to do satire of the president because he just does it.
He outdoes himself.
Right.
It's like, like the really famous Charlie Chaplin movie where he's making fun of
The Great
Hitler.
Dictator, yeah.
And the Great Dictator, and it's so funny because he's buffooning around. Like,
Yeah.
so imagine this fascist.
Could you
like,
have
just
this
an
crazy
absolute
time?
buffoon, and then it's just there in front of your eyes.
Right, I mean, it's
saying like, sometimes you gotta flush the toilet 14, 15
Right,
times.
I know.
You're like, we don't need to know that, sir.
Right?
You
Or
can't
just-
make fun of.
or
The only
just-
thing you can do is
yeah.
repeat.
Spoken like a man who pays
Right.
someone to flush his toilet.
Like, how do you poke fun at power when the power
They keep
literally
topping
is
you.
a commedia
Right.
dell'arte
It's
generalissimo?
true. I mean,
Well,
and this,
that is the question. How
it is.
how do you do it?
Well, it's
Well-
a struggle because I mean that's what Veep suffered from, and it was a satire of politics. And as the seasons progressed and it started, reality started to mirror the art, it became harder to make it funny because there was nothing funnier than, it's just like what Gavin was saying. You can't top a guy who's already ahead of you in the buffooning, in the clown.
Right.
Yeah, like,
And
what do
I
you
vote for
do
you and
portray
Miguel,
Trump
right?
doing a cure for cancer or something? Make him smart? People are like,
Yes,
"Oh,
how
that's hilarious."
subversive,
Right.
right?
Like what?
Aurora?
Well, I will say that like people are out there doing it. Like it's definitely hard when what you're talking about, Gavin, is like I'll just repeat it. You know, basically what he said, as you say. But people constantly have the, like everybody has the need to poke fun at him. And if you go on, like the meme world is, I think, where people are finding their salvation, and like the GIFs and the Photoshops, and you go on Reddit and people are very funny, and people find 1,001 ways to make fun of this guy and to make fun of their own despair. I mean, like like Devin Nunes. Now there's Devin Nunes' cow, Devin Nunes' mine. He's suing them. It's a really. I think that is one of the most compact ways you can show. It's like you're a douchebag. Like, okay, well, I'm gonna make this and this, and we're just gonna tweet about you, and you're gonna make it worse all by yourself. And it's this lockstep of reality and satire kind of becoming
meta-comedy.
a weird meta comedy,
Ron?
and people find it any way they can.
I have a perfect snapshot of this very thing we're talking about is the hilarious, I don't know if it was in a show, but I just saw it on social media. It was just a snapshot, so I didn't have to click onto it to know what the story was. Fabricland declares bankruptcy because of Don Cherry.
Yeah.
Right? I like it. So, Don Cherry is perfect. You can't, how do you top Don Cherry? They found a way. It's so genius.
Oh my God.
It's just I put down the phone so I can clap at it.
Yeah.
But I think that's.
She sent me a recording of her clapping. I was like,
No, there are many times the Beaverton just makes me laugh out loud with that. Oh, you guys are great at that.
The Beaverton, I think, does particularly well. And it's important to remember, because we're talking about heady things like smartness and satire and all that.
Yeah.
But it's also with all of that, there's sort of a resurgence of the need to be silly.
Silly,
Yeah.
yeah,
The
for
silly
sure.
angle is very important, and it comedy kind of comes in ways, but I like that it's coming back to it's so overwhelming.
Right.
The amount of information that we
nobody
have all
wants
the
to
time.
nobody wants to be talked down to or have sort of a didactic approach run at them where it's like, here's how you should feel. There's a lot of I remember John Oliver, whose show I really like. Right after Donald Trump won the election, I was like, I can't watch John Oliver's show anymore. I just felt like I was part of that choir that was just eating up whatever I needed to hear without actually engaging with reality. And I think there's a little bit of that element that's kind of boring people in comedy now.
Yeah.
I think satire is very possible, and I think for me, I see Alec Baldwin do Donald Trump on SNL, and I just kind of I just wave it off. To me, it's A, not even a good impression at all. B, they don't ever say anything at all in those sketches. He just says my daughter's name is Tiffany, and it's there's no humor here. You're not making any sort of commentary. So if you check out something like On Cinema with Tim Heidecker and Greg Turkington, that's a show that's been running for 10 seasons over 7 years, where they play versions of themselves who review movies. And the whole premise was neither of them ever see any of the movies, and they give 5 bags of popcorn to every movie, no matter what. And it started as a focus point on how vapid those movie reviewing shows are, where they're just the greatest part about The Joker is that Robert De Niro finally gets a chance to play an iconic role. For me, that's 5 bags of popcorn. That's the sense of humor that it started as. But then those guys sort of became the people we saw in politics. So Tim Heidecker's character became someone who started running for politics and was clearly just a boob and an idiot who doesn't understand anything. And it's a little bit of a deep, weird world to dive into, but to me, that's the best. Oh, that's Donald Trump right there. That's him.
But your critique of the Alec Baldwin impersonation.
Sure.
And why? Clearly people love it.
Yeah,
right?
it's a big hit.
People love it. So what is it? Is it that?
And
we're
everything
tired of
people
it?
like is good no matter what.
No, but is it that, to Gavin's point, enough is safe in the world already? Why can't someone just tell a fart joke? And this allows them to do both, which is we've checked the political box, you're getting your Trump, but in a really stupid, silly way.
Yeah.
Well, it's easy. If you don't have time or it's too painful to fully engage, you can scan you could just look at the headline or, the joke,
Yeah,
Fabricland. It's like, I know what the story is. I got a good laugh. I can move on, but I don't have to revisit how awful Don Cherry is and how we put up with him for so long before we could just say, you know what, fuck you to that guy. And then, by the same token, the silly just allows you to you get your you get the release. It's like the pressure cooker valve. You let some of the steam off with just the silly thing. Just tell me what the most obvious thing is. I don't have to overthink it.
Yeah.
He's just a silly man. He just looks funny. Good enough. Boom.
You remember when the Rob Ford thing was unfolding? I remember thinking at the time, the Rob Ford thing meaning the entire time it was.
Yeah, the whole.
And did you guys hear about this? I remember when that was happening. He did crack cocaine. Did anyone? He was a bad person. So I remember when that was happening. I was like, when the movie version inevitably comes out about this, or several. One is coming up already that looks very bad. It was just, I remember thinking, who's going to be able to play this role in any capacity?
Pat.
You couldn't be more ridiculous than he was in real life. Especially if you don't know about Rob Ford, you watch that movie, you'd be like, I can't watch this cartoon. And you'd be like, no, that's what he really was like. Yeah. And to me, that is something that was missing a silly valve,
The great podcast, The Gravy Train, which is the precursor to the movies, but fantastic. Sorry.
I just wanted to talk about silliness a little bit because we always
Let's talk silliness.
Let's talk silliness.
Let's do it. Let's talk silliness.
Because I think that necessarily we always kind of the stupid, the silly, we put it down, but it's just so inescapable as people that we need that, and it's not, even though it is like the base, like the stupid stuff, that's just a value that we put on, but it has to be there because when we get to the point, when there's so much to be worried about and stuff that is painful and things that are totally offensive that you need to joke about, sometimes that can be so overwhelming that, as you say, you need that escape valve, but you need, just going back to what you said that Jon Stewart saying, no, I'm not your monkey. I'm almost afraid to put a moment around that because comedy is now so serious and so fucking amazing, because
as we all know, Tucker Carlson went away forever.
We stopped wearing bow ties. That was the big.
But it's not like Jon Stewart stopped being silly and kept on being important from then on. I would say that he wasn't. He's not going to be their monkey. He's not going to be their. He'll be everybody else's monkey. There'll be fart jokes and jokes about people shooting. Cheney shot the guy in the face and all that kind of stuff. Because that's never going to stop. We're never going to stop needing that as long as we're, meat bags who need to do all the base things that we do. Farts are always going to be funny to us.
Right.
But
all four of us have tattoos of meat bags.
Meat bag.
I'm farting right now.
I can attest to that.
Awesome.
Your chair just rose.
But you can never. You can never know what the next thing, specifically what it is that's going to make you laugh. You can say, how is it that this thing is it? Because we never. What the angle that makes us laugh, is always going to change based on where we're all living our lives and what's going on, and stuff. Art changes. That this is such a nerdy thing to say, but Beowulf and all those things had really fallen out of favor until the First World War happened, and then suddenly, those things are really, they speak to our deep thing, and comedy is always going to keep changing and surfing, and so it's a hard ride to try to keep in touch with how do I feel as a human? What is everybody referring to? What do we all need? Yeah. Do we all just need to laugh, or do we all need to find a new thing? When you find somebody who puts, what I love about stand-ups particularly is what I love is when they make me laugh and they crystallize something, the feeling that I was kind of grappling with, into words that I hadn't been able to for myself. And it's thanks. You just opened a window in my head and you made me guffaw because of it.
Right.
And so I love comedians who do that.
Those are typically the traditional stand-up things, though, right? I never looked at, not to belittle your insight, but I never looked at an airplane that way. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
But Gavin, on your show, do you find that you're getting that, because you lead with the headlines?
Mm-hmm.
Well, silliness saves us all the time.
Right.
We have to actually talk,
literally
joke
play the
about the
headlines,
news
yeah.
and have questions about what's actually in the
Right.
news. But then, we if we're gonna usually any hard stuff will be just sort of shoved in a kind of a passing one line and go sort of British style. But I think Canadians are good at silly because we're sort of British influenced and American influenced.
right.
Americans are
It's
not
great.
that great at silly.
No.
But you know, so for like, yeah,
Plus we have
because
Quebec,
news, it
so.
saves us all the time because we're just like, God, how do we like talk about this in any way that's like just not infinitely depressing or something? Or like Brexit's been going on for like 110 years.
Right.
And we have to do it, and then I'm like, how do we, and then I just think of dumb things, like there was a Theresa May press conference where it was like, how do you sum up today? And then so then I just was like, oh, let's do it like Mary Poppins. Like, let's just have her be like, it's a stupid, careless, unrealistic Brexiting prognosis. Anyway, the outcome is atrocious. If we leave without a deal, well, that would be precocious, stupid, careless, unrealistic Brexiting prognosis.
Yeah.
And then we can just like, you know, do something stupid, and then you can talk about Brexit for 5 minutes, and it's fine. And then you just go, or like, yeah, we just do. The dumber the thing I can couch something in, really, the better.
Yeah.
Like this week, we're talking about Andrew Scheer, and I'm just like doing a Julius Sugarbaker rant from designing. You know what I mean? But,
Obscure reference for the audience. There we go.
but look, these people know designing.
solid
impression. Him and that guy.
What an
This
impression.
is the exact demographic. It's
So it's, yeah, this is perfect for
kids
that.
at home who are live streaming this. Google it.
Yeah,
CBC
that's right.
Radio. We're
But
safe.
you know, but what is interesting to note, you know, as you talk about stand-up and audiences and the appetite for the different things, you know, with Because News, you've got an audience that is coming. They know exactly what you're doing, right? When you come to see stand-up comedy, you are not sure if the audience is in the appetite for to hear commentary about what we're all going through, or if they want an escape from it. So it shifts and changes, you know, where what a comedian is going to then present to you. There are some comics out there, and certainly newer comics are just, you know, working on their perspective, what they're dealing with right now, you know. So I have the privilege as someone who's had over 30 years in the biz to, you know, to pick and choose. Like, I don't know what this audience is in the mood for. They're a comedy club audience, so they're going to be at least 20 to 25 years younger than I am. What do I want to do right now? Do I want to say what's important to me, or do I want to, you know, what I call dance for grandma? Just, you know, have an easy show and get a good laugh. And that may be
Don't
different.
go Fortnite with them. Yeah.
Right? Do you know what I mean? Like, I like, am I going to speak truth to power because that's the place I'm at right now, let's say, that day, or am I going to just come out and entertain with a grab bag of things? Again, it depends on what the audience is in the mood for.
Well, it's interesting because
the audiences have become splintered as well,
Yeah, I
right?
think you're right.
I was gonna say it's interesting because like those from a corporate crowd go like, well, I'm at a point in my career where I'm going to sit on boards of not-for-profit organizations, right? Which is kind of what you're like. Well, no, I'm elevating this
That's
to something
stage
more
in your
important.
life, right?
Yeah.
I don't know
This
if
is your
I don't know if
not-for-profit board.
I don't know if you're elevating it, but it's having to keep in mind that an audience for a comedy show, they can only come and see Because News, or only tune into the Beaverton, or only watch Baroness, and they don't have to ever watch all of the same shows at the same time. Like, you can just have fans for each distinct genre, and that is different. That is certainly different. It's one of the biggest changes. You can just stay
hear
in your
what you
tiny
want
little
to
lane.
hear, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rather than be challenged, which is what I
Right.
think comedy has a reputation of doing for so long.
Right. To be provocative.
Yeah, and even the idea that there isn't conservative comedy is like, it's not exactly true. There are weird conservative pockets of comedy, specifically in the United States, that are absolutely gigantic.
Huge.
Yeah.
But it's just for a very specific group of people who want to hear exactly what they want to hear.
For sure.
And they're looking to be entertained, not challenged.
Now, because you mentioned earlier, like, oh, people can, in addition to segmenting their comedy into what they want to hear, but they can now also spend their time with memes. And so how has this low cost of production so that I'll remember somebody came up to me after a speech and said, my daughter's a comedian. And I said, that's amazing, that's great. He said, what do you recommend she do for her career? And I said, stage time, stage time, stage time. Get as much stage time.
Become a doctor.
Yeah. No, but she said, no. Oh,
Plumber,
she's
garbage man, anything else.
never performed in front of people before. She just does YouTube videos.
Lily Thing.
And my first reaction was, oh, she's not a comedian. And then I was like, well, who the hell am I to say she's not a comedian? Of course she's a comedian. So how has that type of comedian and that type of constant production of comedy material from the average person sitting on their couch cranking on a meme, which is a template that they just type in and share. How has that changed the game for all of you?
I think it's opened the doors, really. For me, I never felt any sort of affinity for the mold of stand-up comedy. That go out there and say, like, here's my issues and whatever, which is
You clearly hate stand-ups. We get that.
No, for me, it's one of my favorite things to watch, but to do myself, I never felt the need to go up there and tell my own story in blunt words that way. But I feel like comedy has shifted to a way that I can go on any stand-up show and perform just doing my own kind of thing. And I feel like that is a broadening that's helping everybody. The rules around stand-up and performance were pretty arbitrary, I think, for so long. And now, yeah, the idea that you have to suffer in front of small audiences only before you can say you're a comic is like, no, that's not true necessarily. If people like what you're saying, you're performing comedy, you're doing it. To me, I think it can only bring good results.
Yep.
It democratizes the whole thing. I'm all for it. I think it's great. I mean, that's what.
What a safe
honestly,
answer, Gavin.
No, but that's what I would have. If YouTube had been around when I was 14,
for sure.
I arguably probably would be much more famous than Rich than I am right now.
Totally.
Because I ran around with
Yeah.
like
Oh,
a little
yes.
handy cam
Yes.
and made like parody
You
videos
would have
of
so
You do the
many
VCR to
subscribers.
VCR.
all of that thing. Like
Born
all
too
they would have been
soon.
doing was just
Born
like
too soon.
making videos, like
It's okay, Gavin.
time and time. No,
Yeah.
I mean,
Bad, it's so true.
no, but it's
You'd
true, like,
be huge.
if you
What's
just like,
wrong with you?
I love it that kids, like, I love it that some weird kid could be
Gavin,
like,
go
I'm
home and
gonna
do
do
the
Gavin,
YouTube channel too.
You
character.
talk
Nice.
as if this isn't a possibility now, but I promise you tomorrow you could start making
I
videos.
know, but
and
I'm
you
too,
would-
I'm too old and I'm too
No,
lazy and I can't.
no, you're not.
But it's also like, I can go out in the
No.
stand-up club and have people like, be like, boo, his, but like, the YouTube kids have it arguably way worse because they've got to be like, why are you so ugly? Like, they have actual, like, critiquey comments.
That's
that
just
they're
a
not
button
gonna-
you can click.
And
now.
like
Why are
a
you so-
million followers.
I-
I don't
You know
envy those kids at all
you know what's
because
funny?
I know how mean people are on the internet just from Because News, and I don't want it.
That was the point that shifted
Yeah.
Bo Burnham for me when I thought, he's just a YouTuber.
No, and then he made that great movie.
He made a
did.
great movie, but
It's great.
when he talked about, you think it's easy getting heckled? Go ahead, read the comments on the first video.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I was gonna bring him up
Sit down
actually
with
as
each
somebody.
heckler.
Yeah, it's
But-
like having an interview with every heckler.
Yeah,
You're right, it's almost more personal.
but
Yeah, right,
I
right.
was gonna talk about him specifically because I don't know if I have the opposite relationship with the internet, but I spent a lot of time on Reddit, a lot of time, and because it's an escape from the real world, to be totally honest, and you get to see like people living their lives and what are they interested in and all these things. And you remember that people love wholesomeness, people love connecting, people love sharing, and people are snarky also. But and my son also, he was like, watch these vines. So we started watching like Vine compilations. The 6-second
Vine
thing.
is everything.
Vine is so funny. I can't even tell you. And like Bo Burnham has a bunch of them. And then we watched 8th grade. I was like, oh wow, I wonder how much experience he got doing that. But as far as like that kind of online community, how it affects us, I mean, I can tell you like in really specific ways, like on Baroness, I kind of keep tabs on like what is out there, like what's going viral, because like it's happened where it's like we have this sketch, we filmed it ready to go, and it takes us so long in our production that it's not like a weekly thing. It's like we shot it last September, we're getting ready in 2 months to release it. A viral video just had the exact same premise, we have to cut it, kind of thing. So that's happened. But
So
also,
that's
like,
what happened to my sketch.
Yes. That's the only reason. But then also things like, I can absolutely tell you that like Reddit and all that kind of stuff made me really embrace like wholesome comedy, because there's this whole like movement of like wholesome stuff on Reddit. People loving wanting to have those like genuine connections, and there's so much funny stuff about it. And I was like, oh right, like it's a good reminder that you always are told in improv, make a positive choices, like those kinds of things. But it's just an incredible reminder of that. And we started just having like these little like, just not based on ideas that we got there, but just like, oh yeah, like let's just like have people be amazing to each other and like what's funny about that. And
TikTok is fun.
TikTok is very funny. So there's always those things. And so I found so I was gonna say the other thing that I've found is that the internet is this incredible like golden age of access. It's like I have this weird fascination with the Fox and the Rabbit from Zootopia. I kind of think they seem to like each other. Going like 1,000 people have already made art about it, kind of thing. So you realize that like whatever it is that is going on with you, there's probably a huge community out there, and people are ready to connect about it. So I think on Baroness, where it's a bit different from like the weekly news stuff, we take so long that we have to go for stuff that is a little more like long-term truth. So we just really pay attention to like, what are we all in the writing room like feeling as people? What are the things we're paying attention to just in our private daily lives? Because those are the moments we're going to film, and that's probably, it's probably a person alone with their laptop watching, and are they seeing their private self reflected? So that's how those things work into that process anyway.
Which takes us back to where we began, right? That all this is an insight based on a truth and giving a version of that to the audience.
Yeah.
Now, we're gonna have a few minutes for questions from the audience. Some of you are looking like, my questions, what's Reddit?
It's a wonderful place full
we
of
can cover
kind
that.
people.
We can cover that.
It's also a horrible, scary place.
It was, but yeah.
Don't
It's
click
just
the
right.
wrong
So
one.
what's Reddit? Who is Bo Burnham? Bo Burnham is the Tim Conway of, no. Are there questions? If you have questions, please just put up your hand right at the back there, or on the side. There we go. And the microphone, Colleen's got a microphone, she'll come.
Thank you.
Red is like four.
Dare I ask you to discuss Kathy Griffin?
Sorry?
So say that again.
Was the question, what do we
Kathy.
think? What does the panel think of Kathy Griffin?
No, what happened with the head of Donald Trump being decapitated?
Was there a line that was crossed? Is that?
No, she
Well, I'm
made that
asking
photo.
you, what are your thoughts, the discussion?
Oh, okay.
panel?
I personally
On
think
that.
that was just a bad, unfunny joke. Like, I didn't know what the joke was of her just holding up a severed head. But
Did
I
you-
don't think it crossed any lines. I really don't. I think that one
you
of the
believe in
funniest-
her right to do it?
Absolutely, of course.
Yeah.
And I
I
think that
agree.
the conservative outrage around it is sort of their best play at comedy. The way that Republicans engage in the national conversation of politics is like in bad faith. So them being like, we're outraged, I was like, that's funny, because no, you're not.
Right.
Yeah, you're not really.
Hence
Yeah.
my next question, if Lenny Bruce had done that, very different story, correct?
Yeah, that's an
Kurt,
interesting point, but
Elvira?
I think it might be a false equivalence simply because they're just, you can't compare, like you can't, I don't know that a world that Lenny Bruce would ever have done something, so it seems sort of vulgar. He would talk about, because I'm a huge fan, I know that his work was so intelligent. Like, this was a man who just like took a thing and then took it apart. I don't know that he would be so base as to draw the same line. He would have dissected that scenario.
He was also going up against a threat of arrest, which she obviously was not.
For
right?
sure. Yeah, exactly. But she was severely punished. Now, are you saying that's because
Well-
she was a woman? Is that?
Well, no, because here's the thing. What's interesting is that the background on that photograph, and hence her enactment of it, was that a photographer had actually taken the photograph and suggested that she use that.
Right.
So it was kind of like a publicity stunt.
Sure.
and I
She
was
signed off on it.
been a
I think
publicist for
the
years.
idea might have been suggested to her, and I could see her going, oh yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally going to do that. And
Thank
then
you.
be surprised by the backlash. Totally surprised by the backlash. And I think that it was disproportionate to a perfect snapshot of the time. She lost a ton of work, and so that forced her to apologize in ways that she should not have and would not now today do. But that was certainly the first wave of that, as
Yeah,
Miguel
should
is
she have
saying.
doubled down on it?
That outrage.
Was that the mistake? As a comedian, was her mistake not to double
You-
down on it and say, that's right, I said it?
Well, that's
Or I did it.
but that's your choice. You know, had I made a horrible mistake like that, I would have said, I don't know why I thought an unfunny thing could possibly be funny. I will try better to be funny, because it wasn't very funny.
Sure.
But I think in that case, I think she, then the righteous anger came up of like, how come I lost work just for being a comedian? I don't think she had made the connection that it wasn't funny.
But they also did like a long, full FBI investigation, which was that's where
Snoop
pushed it
Dogg
to
put out a
absurd.
song
Yeah.
where he
Yeah.
talked
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
killing
You're
Donald
right.
Trump, like ironically. And there was a little bit of a kerfuffle of like, what is this? This is rude. But then it was like, who cares? We love Snoop. So
Yeah, weirdly.
He was high at the time. We have a question.
Where? Do we have any more?
Oh, sorry, Colleen. I thought you. Right here.
Okay.
Hi, yeah. I read that brief on social media about the Fabricland, and and it took me. I read it and thought, oh wow, another retailer closing, and and then I went on to read on Don Cherry, and I knew there was a joke. But before, I didn't think it was a joke. I mean, what's the future of social media? I mean, we've really gotten lazy, and we believe pretty much everything that comes through that feed, no matter what it is. What do you guys think of?
The idiocracy, right? Isn't that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a dangerous.
Do you get the people confusing you for because you're on CBC?
Well, I mean, they don't think we're generally real news because there's people laughing in the audience and stuff like that. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I just think we're hitting a threshold. I did a whole live show about this, like me, just like my own frustration with social media and just
Please
wanting to
like
kind of
me.
go away from it because, yeah, I mean, I know just because I have a dad who's an Albertan and sort of he's my litmus test, but like, he will tweet and share every false, like, and parrot it back to me. Like, I'll go and be like, Dad, and he'll be like, well, I mean, I don't think it's fair that an immigrant gets more than a pensioner. And I'm like, that's 100% not true. That's a fake meme that someone made up.
Right.
And now you're parroting back to me. And he's like, well, still seems true to me. So
Right.
what
There's
do
got to
you
be a
do?
kernel
Like,
of truth for sure.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I do think that at some point they're going to have to, I think it's coming. I think sort of weird kind of regulation and then a whole censorship conversation it's all about to blow up in the next. That's what we have to look forward to in 2020 is what's true, what's fake, what's censorship, and what's free speech.
I feel like
is
media
gonna be real
literacy is
fun.
going to increase
I agree.
immediately, faster
Critical
than we think.
thinking.
Humans are so quick with technology. Facebook and social media, Facebook specifically, but social media took us all by surprise, and the way it's attacked everything has kind of freaked us all out. But every story, the main demographic of people, unfortunately, who are fooled by fake news are much older. Younger people who grow up with this technology in this media landscape are going to be more media literate than the generations that came before them. So there's a weird.
I hope.
Either that or every show will just be ow my balls. We won't be able to grow food anymore. But in any case,
But what was interesting about your question was I thought that it was a comment on the news. That the news has become so sensational. We used to, Pat and Peter, on This Is That. It was
This Is
that. You would listen in and people were like,
They'd be
they would
crazy.
think it was the news, even though it was ridiculous.
It was
You
so
must get
crazy.
this.
Can I tell
yeah,
you
yeah.
something though? They themselves were fooled. They told me at a party once how they had this one listener who was really writing to them a lot and how they thought they'd let her down. It turned out to be our friend Rebecca Northern, who's also an improviser. So just to let you know, the people who are doing the fooling don't always they got letters. They had this whole thing. They were like, oh my God, Janice or whatever her name was that lived out west. But I think just to answer maybe a little portion of your question that fake news, apart from the Beaverton and the Onion and stuff like that, which is actual fake news, for satirical purposes, but the news that has not as much context and not as much information and is biased because of stuff that's a whole thing, and whether people believe that or not is one thing. But people believing the fake stories, that deliberately fake that get put out, part of the thing about comedy is that it's, is this the line? Is this the line? And sometimes was that the line? Oh, the line was back there. Okay, well, now we'll go. And that's the function of comedy, and that's the function of Kathy Griffin doing that thing. It's oh, now we know where the line is, and you passed it a long time ago, and so she gets, punched for doing that, and metaphorically speaking, and so that's kind of our job, and it's for so everybody can see oh, this is where we're all at specifically, and it's not a comfortable thing, and we have to do it so much more because there's such a big conversation constantly now. We're such a social animal, and we hear each other completely all the time, and then you get in your little tunnels. But it's people are always going to fall for stuff, and we just have to keep talking. That's so vague, but
No, so given that the role that comedy now needs to play and is playing. Is this something, it's interesting, Sandra Battellini's group, what's it called?
I can't remember.
Yes.
It's a union for comedians,
Yeah.
essentially.
Canadian Association for Stand-Up Comedy.
Association for Stand-Up Comedy.
CAC.
CAC.
So now there's an association for stand-up comedy. Should we be funding, if comedy is leading
Yes.
social change?
Funding, yes.
No, but
You're
I
gonna
mean,
ask more comedians, should we be funding? Yeah.
Should we get money? Yes.
Why, did you bring your checkbook?
right now?
Show
Gavin
us.
and Aurora
Yeah.
Friday night did a free show for
Yep.
the Toronto Sketch Comedy Festival because
Well,
and
we did
this isn't a
free that
political
we didn't get
statement.
paid. Yeah, but it was a fundraiser.
It was a fundraiser because the Toronto Sketch Comedy Festival, due to a change in provincial government, has lost its funding. And that's not a political statement, it's just ebbs and flows of different governments. But should we be, as citizens, be fighting to support comedians the way we support other not-for-profit organizations?
Well,
who
We
lead
should always be fighting to support. comedians.
Yes,
always.
Fund art. It's just the bottom line. It's what Sandra highlighted by having to form CASC is that she couldn't apply for any sort of arts council grant. I mean, this is the difference between her doing it now and when I did it in the 80s. I didn't think that you could fight back. It was like, no, stand-up isn't an art. And I was like, I guess it isn't. Back to the
Back on
bar.
stage.
Back to the bar that I'm performing in. But it's art. Art should be funded. It's the only way to keep people.
I mean, it's either funded.
And by the way, that was only about 40%.
It really
So we know
was.
where we're at.
Okay, we
I thought
see.
that
It really was.
But I was going to say, like, you can have it funded by the government, or you can have people fund their careers by doing what we all do, which is, accept your industrial gigs,
Sure.
where you go and you do, you get paid, like, nice, handsomely for one night, but that might be your one gig that month, kind of thing. And not censorship, but it's like, okay, don't talk about this and this and this, and we're here to talk about this, and that kind of capitalistic censorship
Sure.
that ends up happening. Like, you're going to have people asking you to select your comedy either way, whether it's a government that has like designs on you, or if the people, what are they willing you to pay for? So the job of the comedian is, no matter what, to get out there and get their thoughts out and speak truth to power whenever they can, and juggle those things.
I also would say this as a piece of advice, which is don't take local art for granted and support extremely local art as often as you can. Just thinking about the music industry in Toronto, arguably internationally, Toronto has the highest platform and persona that it's ever had. But there's fewer music venues here than there's ever been. They're closing at an astonishingly fast rate. And it's similarly true of comedy venues. Every venue where you can go take in local art is collapsing all around you. And everyone takes it for granted that it's always going to be there and that it's always something that you can just go pick up when you're interested. But it's not. It's something that you have to actively support.
Yeah, there's nothing like seeing.
Yeah!
Is that clapter? I think it's about clapter, right?
Yeah.
It's about clapter.
There's something about, and you're
That was
right.
my best joke.
And the reason that point is so salient is because you don't have to leave your home at all to get any sort of entertainment. But there is nothing, comedy, like music, but comedy especially for those of us who love comedy, it is a form of art that encourages critical thinking wherever you land on the spectrum of that. And there's nothing like seeing it live. I actually don't enjoy watching comedy anywhere but right there, because you will never have that group, that audience come together for any other reason than that night to see that show. And seeing it live will transform you a little bit, whether you are getting validation for how you're feeling, or whether it provokes something else within you. It's such a vital art form, and it really is art, and fuck anyone who doesn't think it is.
Yeah.
That was so nice until right at the end, and it was F you.
Don't you judge me, man.
Needs to be said.
Well, I think the discussion was really that we wanted to talk about comedy, and I think many of us probably came in with one perspective, what we thought comedy was or what it could be. And speaking of transforming, all of you have helped transform that discussion for everybody in this room. So
Well, you
thank
really
very
started
much.
it off very, very nicely, Ron. The way the way you laid it out was really kind of amazing. It made people realize this wasn't going to be as fun as they thought.
A big hand for our panel, everybody. Thank you very much.
Go out on that one. That's a big laugh.
Just be seated. It's not. I get the last word. I get the last word. Aurora was going to leave. Did you see that? She's going to walk right off. So insightful. So funny. We enjoyed every single minute of it. It was amazing. The bar remains open. Please stick around and chat. And Elvira, live matters. It's what the Canadian Club does. We've been doing for so very, very long. We believe in it. It's so important. So thank you, Miguel, Elvira, Gavin, Aurora, Ron. Thank you all for coming. Thank you. You're a master. You're a master. Thank you. Yes.